For decades, America has tried to combat the harms of drug use primarily through banning drugs and incarcerating people who use them. But this has caused a violent underground market for drugs, increasing crime in our communities. It's caused contaminated substances, increasing overdose deaths, and it's caused incarceration to skyrocket, destabilizing families. What we're doing isn't working. Crime, death, and broken families are the collateral damage of using the criminal justice system to address the public health issue of drugs. If you're looking for a better path forward, you're in the right place. What if we changed our drug policies to prioritize life, health, harm reduction, and thriving? And what if it benefited all of us? Our criminal justice approach to drugs had a beginning, and it can have an end. Join us on the journey to end it for good. I'm Christina Dent, your host, and if you're new here, End It for Good is a nonprofit started in 2019, based in Mississippi, that invites people to support approaches to drugs that prioritize life and the opportunity to thrive. This podcast is one of the ways we do that. You can head over to episode 34 to hear my story as a conservative Christian foster mom, changing my own mind on the best path forward with drugs, and then come on back and dive in deeper. I didn't change my mind overnight, and most other people don't either. We all need time to learn, think, ask questions, and explore. Whatever your perspective is, I'm glad you're here. Let's journey together. Welcome back to the End It for Good podcast. I'm Christina Dent, your host, along with Bryan Mauk, our CEO, who's joining me today for a little discussion of current events, past events, and some thoughts on concerning things, but also some exciting things that are happening. So, Bryan, welcome back to the End It for Good podcast.
Hello, it's so great to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's dive in. This first thing that we wanted to talk about is actually something that you had sent to me related to kind of the history of where we have gotten stop and frisk laws, which are now being used in other ways. And so this is part of our kind of broader discussion today about how drug policies and how we have approached drug policies is now being used to erode. It has been an erosion of civil liberties from the beginning related to drugs. It is now being expanded in scope and use. So talk a little bit about that. What have you learned, and how do you see that as kind of the next concerning step that's happening related to our drug policies?
Yeah, no, of course, and I think we talk a lot about the three harms of the drug war, right? That the substance changes, the individual changes, and then of course the market changes, right? And I was talking with a friend, and he was proposing a fourth harm to the drug war, which is the civil liberties we give up along the way in the name of fighting the drug war, and that really got me thinking. And one of those, right, of course, is kind of this, what was really popular in New York and many other cities, is the stop and frisk of the 90s, right? That if somebody, looks a certain way, you can stop them, frisk them, and find drugs, or, and then then criminal justice from there on out. And that the New York police got huge into that, right? I remember an article talking about the police referring to it as like opening a box of Cracker Jacks. You never know what you're going to find stopping people in the subway, right? And this really kind of stop and frisk approach that was really made possible, from court precedents going back as far as Terry v. Ohio in 1968. And that, ironically, that whole line of legal precedent is what's being used today by ICE and immigration, because someone looks like they could be an immigrant. We can stop them and frisk, stop and question citizenship because they look like they could be an immigrant, right? So it's these civil liberties that we've given up a little bit along the way over 40 years that are now really being expanded upon. We've opened the door, and now the water's really flooding through.
Yeah, which is so interesting, because when we see things happen in real time, we see the application to the current moment that we're in. We think, well, we've got to have that law because of this one particular thing that we're trying to deal with. But the laws that we get end up being used in a whole host of different ways that are not specific to that particular thing that we're giving up at that particular moment. And I think so much of what we're seeing right now kind of across the country as we kind of wrestle with a lot of the challenges of our day is this movement from kind of, yes, these are fundamental rights that we have to preserve. This is what makes America America, to, well, typically we have to preserve that right, but right now it's really important for us to kind of back off of that and maybe overstep those rights in order to deal with something. And yet we've seen, all through history, when we give up some of those rights early on, they tend to continue to erode over time, and they're used for other things. And now we have this kind of movement towards people can be stopped for a multitude of things, for a multitude of reasons, just because of, the way that you look. Which, my whole family is Dutch immigrants. I am as white as can be. So but, I think back to 100 years ago when all of my great grandparents, like both sides of my family, everybody is all Dutch immigrants that came over around the turn of the whatever that was, when it went from the 1800s to the 1900s. I always get my centuries wrong. Is it the 19th century, the 20th century? Anyway.
Yeah.
Early
20th century Fox is how I calibrate.
Thank you. I can always count on Bryan to come up with something to help me connect dots, because he's very good at figuring out little connection points. So there we go. Turn of the 20th century. Coming over, and so it's just interesting, and I think it's really important for us to think about what we give up and how that can be used over time and how it can be expanded upon over time, and that when we give up rights in small ways for a specific thing right now, we end up giving up rights in much bigger ways for much less specific things over time. That's just how things tend to work.
Yeah, and rare, right? I mean, we always give up the rights in time of an emergency, and it always seems okay then. It seems like the right, but rare do we ever get the rights back. They aren't like, okay, we're gonna stop doing this, and now, right? It always it becomes a precedent moving forward, right? And I also, right, white male, I generally can move about however I feel, but I do notice, right? This is just a small glimpse of when I have a beard, which is winter. I fly regularly. I get stopped by TSA far more when I'm bearded versus when I'm clean shaven, which I find, right? So we've given up my right to be burly and lumberjacky, and that's how it affects me. But more importantly, right, we should be able to move about, and we should be able to, right? This is the proverbial, first they came for people that looked like they did drugs, and then they came for people that looked like they didn't live here, and we've got to stop that, right? We've got to balance the rights of the individual and our freedoms, especially when we're talking about issues, right, of all across the board.
Yeah. So let's talk about here. We've kind of seen this starting. We're talking about what started back in the 60s with stop and frisk, but now every couple of days we're getting a news update that we have bombed a boat off of the coast of Venezuela. There's been multiple boats now that we have bombed as suspected drug trafficking, narcotics, etc. Give us your thoughts on that.
Oh gosh, I mean, so that's just one more extension, right? Instead of it being a person who looks like they don't live here, it's a boat in international waters that looks like it could be heading our way with unknown stuff in it, right? And that's just a whole, and it's not a stop and frisk, right? Where you stop, right? The whole kind of legal idea behind stop and frisk is it's a momentary detention, right? This isn't like, people aren't dying. It's 10 minutes to ask you a couple questions, right? That is the balance of civil liberty versus public safety, right? Versus launching a missile at a boat to kill people based on suspicion, right? Is just completely different. And then you layer on, this is international waters, or even sovereign waters that aren't ours, right? There's just a lot there that's really a bad precedent that we're starting to send, right? And more and more concerns about what exactly are on these boats. They don't seem to, they don't even take the profile really of a drug boat, right? 11 people on board. That's a lot to use our market kind of analogy, right? That's a lot of product you could have if you have 11 people on there, right? You just, iron law of prohibition, you want to pack as much product as you can. So there's just, what kind of due diligence are we having? What kind of rights do all people have that are being protected, right? What kind of international stuff are they? And frankly, if it's a Venezuelan vote in international waters, we don't know it's coming to the U.S., right? There's a lot of time there, and why we can't intercept it is beyond me, right?
And I'll push that even further because I'll play the devil's advocate. I'll say, let's say we do 100% know that there is narcotics on board, and 100% know that we have, drug traffickers on board. Can we do it then? And we would say no. Number one, you're killing people with no trial, this is fundamentally how we operate in America, that people have a right to trial, right to due process. But let's say that someone is even willing to say, well, I don't care about that. I don't care about due process. This is war. We're just going to pretend like it's war. Or maybe I believe that it's war. And so that's okay. We are still stuck with the fact that no amount of bombing any amount of boats is ever going to stop drugs from coming into the U.S. They can be shipped through the mail. They can come through tunnels. They can come from drones. The vast majority of drugs that come to the U.S. come at ports of entry with U.S. citizens. This is not, I do not believe that this is, it's not just that it doesn't work, but it is, we are eroding rights for no purpose. We're not gaining anything from that. You think about, if Walmart knows that they're going to lose 5% of their products to theft or destruction or whatever, they just send 5% more products. They know what their loss is going to be. The same thing happens with cartels. Let's say we start bombing 10 boats a week. Well, they send 10 more boats than they sent before, or they send 10 shipments via ports of entry at the border rather than over the water, or they send 10 more drones, or they send 10 more, whatever it is, packages in the mail. We will not stop drugs with interdiction. That has always been the case. It always will be the case because demand drives supply, and there will always be people willing to supply drugs to people. And so we're giving up rights and are being asked to be okay giving up other people's rights, and we're not getting anything for it. We're getting a news story, and maybe if you don't understand how drug markets work, you think, great, there's a bunch of people who now will not be getting high because that one particular boat is not here. That's not how it works. Yeah. There are so many drugs. They know that they're going to lose some of them on the way, and the world goes on, and people do not feel the impact of that interdiction at all. And even, let's say they did. Let's say there was a city where suddenly there was a lack of drugs because that particular boat had gotten bombed, and they weren't, the drugs weren't there anymore. Are they suddenly more safe? No, they're not, because their drug supply has been interrupted, and we have some research that's been done on that. What happens to overdose deaths when you interrupt the drug supply with interdiction? If the police make a big drug bust in a city, more people die because suddenly there's destabilization in the market. People are sourcing their drugs from different places and people than they did before, who might package them differently, who might have different amounts of how potent it is. So it doesn't stop the drugs. People get them from other places. It does tend to increase the number of people who are dying when you have a big interdiction that happens. So we're not winning on any front, but we are losing and giving up really fundamental and important rights and liberties that are important for all of us, not just people who may or may not be trafficking drugs. I'm not saying that they should be trafficking drugs or that we shouldn't stop those boats and see if they are trafficking drugs. That's fair to do, and that's what we have been doing. it won't ever stop the drugs from coming.
Yeah.
It never has. It never will. But we are now escalating that failed approach and giving up a lot in response.
Yeah, right. If we blow up a boat, we destroyed the boat and the humans on it, right? We've given up the liberties of those people. We've given up a little bit of ourselves as a community, right? And as you said, we haven't stopped. There's 9 more boats right behind it that are coming. There's 9 million people in tunnels coming, right? There are, catapults. There are drones. There are USPS delivering it, right? There's all the ways it's coming in, and it doesn't make us safer. And like you said, it may even make us more unsafe, right? The supply and demand, right? If we really were able to get 9 out of 10 boats coming over, then the supply is going to go down, which means the demand goes up, which means the price goes up. It's harder to get. People are going to do more desperate things to get it. Like you said, they're going to change suppliers, and there's no consistent supply, right? So something that it may have 1% fentanyl now has 5%, right? Because they're jumping over and they overdose and they die, right? Because they don't know that because it's not labeled. And it's just or if they can't get cocaine or crack, right? They move over to methamphetamines, which is something that can be cooked up locally, and when you're in a pinch, right? And again, that's a much more harmful and toxic substance, right? So there's just it doesn't solve any problems. It gives up liberties. It kills a little bit of our community and our humanity, and it makes us more unsafe all at the same time.
Yeah, and if you're on our newsletter list, our listeners that we appreciate. If you're not on the newsletter list, go ahead and get on it. Go to enditforgood.com, and it's right there at the bottom of the page. You will have seen us refer multiple times back to this newspaper article back from 1990 in the Sarasota Herald Tribune on Saturday, April 14, 1990. There is a short piece in it that says, billionaire New York developer Donald Trump said the nation's drug enforcement effort is, quote, a joke, end quote, and repeated his call for the legalization of drugs Friday during a luncheon held by the Miami Herald. And then he goes on to say that we are losing the war on drugs, and the only way to win the war on drugs is to legalize them. You have to take the profit away from cartels, which is exactly what we're saying. So the approach that the president is currently taking is very different from what he knew to be the response that would solve the violence that's associated with this. And we can return to that again. Again, these are choices we've made. We've made the choices to ramp up the drug war at different phases in the 70s and the 90s. It seems to be in some ways that it's ramping up again now. We've got some good news on that front, though. Stay tuned. But in some of these ways, it is being used as a tool to ramp up the escalation of the drug war, erosion of liberties, and I'm gonna connect 2 things that we haven't connected yet related to this. But we just did a podcast episode with Terry Blevins, who was talking about his time as a law enforcement officer and the moral conflict that he felt over the policing of, marijuana or these kind of low-level drug offenses. We talked to a lot of law enforcement officers who have felt that they're being given a task to do that they feel is wrong to enforce, but you can't just tell your superior you're not going to do it. Law enforcement is a paramilitary organization. You follow the orders that you're given, and that is what you sign up for. I am, because my brain works as a connection machine, I'm thinking of, okay, there's a bunch of other people on these, the enforcement front for these boats that are being bombed. Somebody's pushing the button. We're the moral weight of what we're doing. We are asking people to bear. The missile doesn't come out of the air from nowhere. It comes from a bunch of people in a chain of command who are following commands to do these things. And that is, to me, I think we have to also be acknowledging that moral weight. We have to be acknowledging the people that are being asked to participate in these types of approaches that are not helping. They are doing real harm, not just to people's lives, but to the values and the rights that we hold dear. It's not going to solve the problem, but it is having significant impact on people. And that is something I I feel so strongly about that when you have military and law enforcement who they have to follow directions. They're going to do what they're told to do. Then what we're telling them to do is going to be on their conscience, and it should be on our conscience if that is actually right or not, because they've got to bear the weight of that. They can't, humans can't, our consciences don't allow us just to say, well, I was told to do it. It's no big deal. Like that sticks with us still. It's part of what we've been part of. And we should not be asking people to participate in activities that fundamentally go against the values that we have, what the values they are fighting for in many ways in law enforcement and military, and yet some of these approaches we're taking are working against the values I think that they have signed up for.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that back in my days working in prison, especially I worked in a women's prison for a long time doing social work and outreach, and the same kind of thing. It was folks in corrections that are the jailers. Their job is to keep them inside the wire, but they also spend time with them on a day-to-day basis as human beings, getting to know them. And one of the folks used to say, the more and more you talk to them, the more and more they sound like the victims, not the bad guys, right? There were women who had been victims of abuse, victims of trafficking, victims of many terrible things, right? And drugs were a way to cope with that trauma, and drugs were what they were in prison for. So some people would say, oh, that saved their lives, right? Got them out of a bad situation. Not too much better one though, right? Like as a community, we can do better than that. If that's saving their life, we can significantly upgrade lives more than prison if we start to understand that the trauma that is happening and why folks are using drugs, right? And instead of interdicting with force and incarceration, let's force and build people up, right? Start new lives.
Yeah. So talk about 7-OH, because we've had a couple of podcast episodes about that, and Ohio, where you live, has been going to take some action, pausing the action. Tell us the update on 7-OH, and for people that don't know yet, 7-OH is a synthetic, higher potency version of the natural botanical kratom. 7-OH is definitely more potent. Both of them can cause dependence and addiction. We believe they should be regulated for adult use, 21 plus, correctly, appropriately regulated, behind the counter, potency and purity on the package, all of the things. But there's a big struggle happening right now, nationally and at the state level, with states over what to do with natural leaf kratom, as well as what to do with 7-OH. So give us the Ohio update there.
Yeah, so Matt, a couple weeks ago in Ohio, our governor came out asking the pharmacy board to schedule both natural leaf kratom and synthetic variants, including 7-OH, as Schedule 1. And there was a whole bunch of hubbub for a couple days. There was op-eds, there was civil discourse, conversations going on, all sorts of things. And then out of nowhere, at the same time at the national level, the HHS and RFK had a press conference where they talked about 7-OH, and they talked about it as gas station heroin and very bad stuff. And they asked for just 7-OH to be Schedule 1. So then the next day came out in the Ohio papers that our state office got a call from HHS and RFK and was asked to hold off on what they were doing. So now we're on hold waiting for to hear what's going on at a federal level. So it seems like there's a general tension in Ohio. There was the idea of banned Kratom and 7-OH. In Mississippi, we just had the bill to allow Kratom, and then at a federal level, allow Kratom and regulate it, right? Which is what we think is really kind of one of the best outcomes, right? It's age gated and labeled and all the stuff you were just talking about, right? So we've got Mississippi doing great things there, Ohio trying to ban everything. And then the federal government saying, well, Kratom's okay, but 7-OH isn't, right?
7-OH has only been on the market for 2 years, so yeah. There hasn't been enough time to do much of any kind of studying on it. But definitely, on our front, people clearly want to use it. And yeah, are we going to let them use a regulated version that's age gated, or are we going to send this to the boats also. I mean, that's the choice. Is 7-OH going underground? Do we want to give that to the underground market? Do we want to be fighting that with whatever methods that, I mean, it is, we got to take a step back and say, what are we doing?
There's always going to be, I think, new, and I mean this in a good way too, right? There's always going to be new drugs developing. I hope so, right? We need a new penicillin real soon, right? We need new drugs. There's going to be new drugs in the pharmaceutical way, right? We need new drugs coming out, right? And if anytime something has anything that we could be concerned about, we can't just ban it and say we're never even going to study it, right? That's what Schedule 1 is. This is terrible, cannot be used, can't even be studied, right? Or, well, I mean, it can, but really, really hard to study, right? So just to immediately close the door on new substances before we know anything about them, it's just bad public health, right? I mean, we want to age gate it. We want to make people aware of the risks, and then we want to let medicine do its thing, right? Let's find the next penicillin. Let's find the next, right? There could be, I don't know, right? A magical drug out there that's better than opiates, right? That is non-addictive, kills the pain, manages stuff, and is out there, right? It could be, or we can make it, right? Those are both possible in our scientific world, but we've got to give the space for science to do it's magic.
Yeah. I was thinking about what you were just saying because I'm reading the book How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, which is a kind of history of psychedelics and how they went through the research phase. Then there was this kind of huge cultural backlash against LSD, and that resulted in pretty much everything getting put on Schedule 1, and nobody can use it. You can't hardly study it. It is shut down until, for 30, 40, 50 years, depending on the substance. And then there's this new kind of renaissance of research and interest. And it was so interesting to me because I had heard some about the history, but this is the first time I've read a book specifically on the history of psychedelics over time. And it was fascinating to me that there was all kinds of scientific research that was happening in the latter half of the 19th, 20th century. Here we are, back on 20th Century Fox again, about psychedelics and their use in mental health issues and all sorts of other things, and addiction. And, if you've grown up in the time that I have and that you have, we weren't part of the kind of cultural revolution of the 60s and 70s. And so we didn't see all of that. And we have lost that cultural knowledge that before LSD was seen as a party drug from the resistance to, cultural norms. It was being researched for all sorts of things, including, alcohol addiction and all kinds of stuff as a potential help. And now we have that back again. We are now again trying to open the door. So I thought of that because thinking about 7-OH, okay, we ban it. And what happens? We're going to wait, 50 years from now, somebody finally comes back and says, hey, actually, I think we might have something that could be used in helpful therapeutic ways. And we've lost 50 years of potential good that has come from that. Like it seems to be that we potentially have in psychedelics for the use of various health conditions. And so anyway, I just thought about that again.
No, you just think about
here we go,
Right. One, we're pausing any potential future development, right? So that, we're no longer if we're Schedule 1, we're no longer studying it, right? But then 2 is the resources we're taking and stopping that, right? So if we incarcerate just in Mississippi, right, 100 people a year, right? That's $2-3 million in public funds being used to keep people from using it, which could be $2-3 million in a research grant to find a better use for either 7-OH or whatever other substances out there, right? And if you extrapolate that times the trillions on the drug war, right? All the treasure, the literal treasure we've used in this country to stop people from doing something, the time that we've spent talking about it on this podcast ad nauseum, and right?
Brian and I want to go do something else with our careers. We don't want to fight the drug war anymore.
And even just the talent, right? The leadership and the minds, right? And the other things we could be doing instead of arguing about it, right? And if we apply apply that to 7-OH or to some of the psychedelics, where could we be, right? We could have a cure for PTSD by now. We could have a cure for withdrawal and trauma and some of those things, right? I don't, or God knows what else we could have, right? The potential is limitless if we instead of focusing on punishment and stopping people, what can we focus on healthcare and supporting people, and that's better for our whole community, right?
Yeah. And we are excited because in Mississippi, we just had a joint legislative hearing on Ibogaine. So Sam Creekmore, who is the chair of our public health committee in the Mississippi House of Representatives, has gotten really excited about the potential for Ibogaine, which comes from the Iboga plant. It is a very strong psychedelic. We've done a couple episodes on it. And so, it really was this kind of Twilight Zone experience for me sitting in the chamber, the hearing room at the Mississippi Capitol. And here's all these people. Some of them are sharing personal stories. Some of them are experts talking about the way Ibogaine works on your brain and how psychedelics more broadly work, and people talking about the policy options. And so there's different ways of approaching it, whether that is adding, something like Ibogaine to a right to try law. Some states have this right to try kind of, typically we think about that as maybe cancer drugs that aren't FDA approved yet. But if somebody is not responding to the current options, can they try something experimental that hasn't been FDA approved yet, but they can still access that? So maybe it has a place there. Maybe it has a place doing something like what Texas has begun, which is beginning the funding of an FDA trial to get Ibogaine approved for therapeutic use. So there's multiple pathways that this could take, but it's really exciting to see people in Mississippi and in lots of other states. This is happening also. So just, in the last 9 months or so, Texas, Ohio, Arizona have all passed legislation related to Ibogaine. I would expect that's going to be, joined by lots of other states like Mississippi in the next legislative session as the different states get together. But it's really exciting to see that happening. Exciting also to see it happening with Ibogaine, because Ibogaine is one of the psychedelics that has the highest risk. So for me, it's encouraging to see us not shy away from the potential for something through that kind of knee-jerk reaction we typically take, which is like, could this harm anyone? If it could, let's just shut it all down. We know that Ibogaine can be potentially harmful. We know that you need to have it in a clinical setting. You need to be hooked up to a heart monitor. You need to be under the care of a doctor. And we're okay with that because we recognize, we're willing with Ibogaine to hold these two things together, that we can have something potentially risky and it could also be potentially life-saving and groundbreaking. And so we can balance that. And are we willing to do that with other substances also? Yes, there's risk, but there's also potential reward, and banning it isn't going to help anyone, and it's just going to create more harm and more expansion of the drug war, more loss of liberties and due process and all the other things that we are giving up as part of it. So I am excited about that and encouraged by that. We got some very troubling things happening on some fronts, but also some really exciting things happening on other fronts.
That's such great hope, right? I mean, I see hope on the two themes we were talking about, right? One on a personal liberty, right? The right to try potential there, right? If you are, like you said, mostly that's for cancer patients. But I mean, if you are so chronically and clinically depressed, you can't go on anymore, and you're open to trying new things that can give you hope, right? Then let's let people try, right? Let's give them that personal choice, right? And then I'd much rather see state resources go into enabling, not enabling, but enabling research, right? Not enabling incarceration, but let's enable research. Let's enable changing the world. Let's enable something that could help generations to come, and help people get over issues and not use drugs, right? Which is Ibogaine's primarily used for folks with PTSD and folks that are kind of coming out of significant trauma and withdrawal, right? Those are two huge ways we could change the world. And gosh, man, it's exciting to see that diversion of attention and resources to negative to what could be, right? What shouldn't be, what isn't allowed to what could be, and future instead of past, right? And then also just individual freedom and being able to give it a try if you have no other options and feel that alone, right? That's awesome stuff. Really excited.
Good stuff. Well, thanks, Bryan. This has been fun to catch up and talk a little bit about current events. We don't often do a lot of like breaking news kinds of things. We like to have a little more time to think about our response before we come out. But some of these things we've now had multiple instances, and feels like a good time to take a little pause and say, are we sure we want to go down this road? We've been here before, and it is not good. So thanks so much for joining us on the Enter for Good podcast.
So glad to be here.
And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please go ahead and do that now. And leave us a review. Come join us on the newsletter. Come join us on social media. We'd love to have you along for the journey as we pursue more ways to help people and more ways to reduce harm from drugs and addiction.
So how do we shift our drug policies from a criminal justice approach to a public health approach? By inviting one person at a time to change their mind. Changed minds are the catalyst to changed laws. But many people are only willing to have this conversation when they're invited to by someone that they trust. That's you. Invite your friends, coworkers, other people in your circle of influence to consider a better way. At End It for Good, our hope is that people who hear will become people who tell. Start a conversation and join the movement to end it for good.